Welcome to Discovering with Dr. Deb. Our last season, we were discovering the Enneagram with Dr. Deb, and it was packed with a lot of information while also being a lot of fun to talk about and explore the Enneagram and why we do what we do. So go back and check out those episodes if you haven't seen them already. Here we are in season 2, and I'm going to be focusing on trauma and using EMDR therapy as a tool to help process trauma. My co-host for this season is psychologist Dr. Christie Sprowls from Austin, Texas. She has traveled all over the world to provide EMDR in humanitarian efforts, and she has also trained clinicians and providers in EMDR therapy. So get ready, let's dive right in and talk about trauma. Hello and welcome. This is season 2 of Discovering with Dr. Deb, and this season we're really going to jump into talking more about mental health issues and specifically trauma. So we're going to talk about trauma, and then also my favorite therapy to use when people come in with trauma is EMDR. Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So my co-host for this season is Dr. Christie Sprowls. She is a psychologist, right? Okay. She's a psychologist from Austin, Texas. And she's I call her the guru when it comes to EMDR. So she's going to be my co-host for this whole season. So today we're really going to just talk about what happens to the body and what makes something traumatic. So Dr. Christie, people come in all the time and they'll say, I'm coming in for therapy and I have trauma. And we'll kind of unpack what that trauma is and something. So sometimes people, they'll come in and they don't really identify their history or their issues or, their experiences as traumatic. And then when I'm listening to them as a counselor, I'll go, wow, that's a lot of trauma. And then sometimes it's have you thought of it that way? But what happens to our body? What happens when things happen that kind of make an event traumatic?
There are so many components to what happens in a traumatic situation, how we interpret it, what is actually happening. But I'm going to dive into an idea about a car accident, for instance. And if we are engaged in a car accident, we have lots of different ways of managing that. We might talk about it, dream about it, think about it, and then naturally our brain begins to heal itself. All right, that's one of the biggest things about EMDR too, that the brain heals itself. So interestingly enough, if it doesn't do that, there are times when it actually gets sort of just lodged in your neural network. And it kind of hides sometimes, right? So it might be back here, and it's very handy for a situation like that, so that you can get back in the car and drive home and pick up the kids from school and do all the things that you need to do. But other times, this little thing that got locked in the nervous system, and then maybe, you think about another event, and it's over here in the brain. Brain's functioning, and we don't know, it's kind of dormant, it's kind of quiet.
So it's stuck and hidden.
Yes.
Okay.
Stuck and hidden.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're minding your own business.
Right.
And by the way, there's lots of neurological reasons for that, like the amygdala and different parts of the brain and how it handles things and how we learn and store, because we're only going to use from a memory what is useful for us. Okay? So if it's not useful to go there to that really scary place, why do it? Right? The brain goes,
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So what happens in therapy, I think, when people come in, they think, oh, I have to have had this traumatic experience where I almost lost my life. This is, PTSD, almost lost my life. I saw one of my loved ones, possibly dying or going to die or being in danger. There's all these ways in which our brains, signify trauma.
Right. And the things that come to mind for me are veterans that were in war, or people that found loved ones that died by suicide, or like you said, car accident or things like that. And so I think as a culture, a society, it's okay, those things are okay to be labeled traumatic, But then there are a lot of other things that happen, like you said, a car accident, and it just kind of gets stuck, and then our brains can heal themselves, but sometimes they don't.
That's right.
And it just gets hidden then.
Yes.
Right.
It's just compartmentalized.
Okay. So other than those big things that are obviously traumatic.
Well, I love to tell this story.
Okay.
Because it exemplifies how you would not be thinking this is traumatic.
Okay.
A little girl, 4 years of age, is walking down the street. Her father's walking ahead of her, and she thinks her father's just everything, right? So, Daddy, Daddy, hold my hand. And she's just behind him. So he's walking, and he looks back, and he goes, okay, smacks her in the face. Okay? That smack presents itself in my office, 40-year-old woman. What she was encoded in her brain. I can't get what I want, and I'm unlovable because he hit me. Ching, here it is. Then she was walking around in life, and all her life she's looking, oh, there's another example of how I can't get what I wanted. Oh, over here, I'm unlovable. And so it just builds up.
Sure.
Now, none of us on this planet, I think, would think that would be, it was an accident. It
Right.
was just a movement to grab his daughter's hand. That was traumatic for her.
Right.
And believe it or not, it molded her in how she responded to the whole wide world. In her relationships, in her jobs, in every single way.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that's trauma.
Right.
But that's what we are thinking about when we're looking for, as you say, somebody coming in thinking it has to be this tremendous tsunami or flooding or all the horrific things that can happen in life. It doesn't have to be that.
Right.
And it can still have dominion over you.
Right. Because it's stuck and hidden.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Right.
How are you supposed to find it?
Right. So you said, and I know in your trainings you say, when we're doing EMDR with our clients and using that therapy, the brain goes where the brain needs to go for healing. So when these things happen in life, sometimes for a lot of people, the brain will process it and say that was an accident, or maybe that relationship is immediately repaired because the dad recognizes. And so, so then that's not traumatic then. It's processed, it's healed, the relationship is healed, and then that injury to herself from that is healed. So then we don't have trauma. I've had similar things. I had a client who came in, and as a little boy, he wanted to make, I can't remember if it was a birthday card or a Mother's Day card, and got everything out and made her this card and could describe in detail what this card was. Well, the mom came home and really kind of lost it on him. He'd made quite a little mess. And so it's like sweet, but it's like, oh boy, but this was a moral injury to him. And he internalized, I can't do anything right. I am a failure. So several of the things happened over the course of his life. He got in trouble at school, trying to defend somebody, but ended up getting hit. And so he was in a fight. I can't do anything right, even though his intentions were right. So like you said, they go through this life and these things build up, and if we'd been able to kind of unpack that first one, but then it's kind of this complex. Now we have this term too, complex PTSD.
That's right.
And that's really getting some notice in clinical studies and in clinical practice. And that's really helpful too. But when we look at it through the eyes of trauma, it, like we said, it kind of gets stuck and then hidden. And I think a lot of times people are walking around and they don't even of course it's hidden.
Yes, that's right.
So when it's hidden, like they're not really even aware, but it's colored their world then, hasn't it?
It has, because the brain is going to go alert, alert, alert,
right,
whenever it gets triggered, right?
Yes.
It's going to be walking down the street, and then all of a sudden something is familiar, and here it is, and you don't even know what it is.
Right, and then they've developed these coping skills, and everybody's heard of fight or flight. Now we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. We've added a couple to that. So, and I even had one client this last week who said, my triggered self would have done this.
Yes.
So it was like,
beautiful.
Oh, yeah, we're making progress, because she's realized, like, there's this trauma from the past, and she's triggered, and so having just that awareness, so it gets locked in the body, and it's fair to say that's traumatic.
Yes, it is. And I mean, I could go on with example after
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
But something even as simple as losing, a pet. I've had people lose a little bitty bird, right? And that little bitty bird created this whole network of self-worth. I'm not important. Nobody, had taught her how she is supposed to deal with death. Right? So she's out there burying her little bird. And people are so surprised that when we actually reach that little bitty bird, that they start to cry. I mean, they have this very large emotion. And believe it or not, that bird took about 5 sessions of therapy to work through with EMDR.
Wow.
A tiny little bird.
Right.
And okay, that just gives you an idea
Right.
about how these things can get stored. And,
Right.
the brain doesn't know. The brain is just trying to protect you.
Right.
So it's trying to do what it needs to do.
Right.
To keep you going. And
Well, like you said, so you can get back in the car and drive home and
Yes.
right.
Right. And interestingly, too, the idea is this, that I'm a professional, okay? I treat trauma every day. I go all over the world. I tell everybody how to do it. Wait a minute. When I have trauma,
Yes.
I'm a human.
Yes.
So one of my peers pointed out, I believe you're having a trauma response. And I was like, what? And I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So like if I do it,
Yes.
then everybody else can do it. And you just don't know.
Right.
You don't really know how it's impacted you
Right.
and what the limitations are that come with it.
Right. So I think it's good to just kind of introduce like EMDR and how it helps to bring to light what's been hidden and get it unstuck.
Yes, yes.
If I keep using that analogy.
Yeah.
And so I will be honest, I used to go, oh, follow my fingers,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and
Yes.
I hate to admit that because now I'm so sold on it and I love it. And I've seen such transformation with my clients, truly. And I've had clients that I had for years. And then when I was trained in using EMDR, they were like, I would have never gotten there with talk therapy. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how is that even?
It's wild.
It's wild.
And they are saying it.
Yes, they are saying that.
Right,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is like
they are saying it.
Fantastic.
So how does EMDR help unlock that then?
Okay.
This is brain stuff. It's whoosh way over my head.
Well, I kind of like to simplify things. One of my professors told me, always speak to an 8th grader
Yeah.
as if you're speaking in that language. And sometimes it's hard. But, okay, so we were talking about how the brain experiences something and then how it stores it. And it actually is stored in components. So there's a feeling, body sensation. There's an emotion. How do I feel about this? There is something like a negative belief about ourselves that sort of gets bonded in here. And so we're looking for all the components of memory, body, mind, spirit, all the things, okay? And with EMDR, what we do is, and I think this is the question you're asking, but what do we do in
Right.
an EMDR session?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're wanting?
Well, yeah, and then how it frees somebody from that trauma, like because you're held hostage, like
yeah,
you said, that has
yeah.
dominion over you.
Yes,
So
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, so what we do is we just have people come in, we talk about their history, what's been happening, and our little ears are listening for, what might have been traumatic. I'll make it easy for you. That's with the complex PTSD, okay? It's like lifelong. But for somebody who's just been in a car accident, we want to know what was the worst part of it. We'll get an image of what stands out for them in their brain, their negative belief, I'm going to die maybe. All of those things. We're getting these components of memory all together. And then what we're going to be doing is, and I know it sounds goofy and kind of cuckoo, but we do bilateral stimulation of the brain, and there's different ways of doing it. Okay?
Right.
So like this is mechanical, and we have machines that do it now. But so it might be eye movement like this. It might be tapping on their knees, or even their little feet, or doing the butterfly hug.
The butterfly hug.
And for like people who are in the military who I treat a lot, I call this the eagle.
Oh, I like that.
They
Okay.
don't really-
Okay.
and
I'll
like
just use that with
police
all
officers.
men. We're gonna pull up the. Here's the eagle.
Yeah, So the idea is there's lots of different theories about what's happening in the brain. Now there's tons of research about EMDR, you guys, and I don't
By
mind-
smart people.
happens to be all over the world.
Right.
I mean, seriously, it's like crazy amount of research behind it.
Right.
But going back to what do? What we're doing is having them hold something in mind, and by doing some of these are what we think. By having them hold the trauma in mind,
Right.
and then wiggling the eyeballs back and forth.
Right.
There's this whole study, a Stanford study that we're going to show a video of, right? And we're going to install it into this podcast.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Well,
At some point.
okay. I hope. Oh, anyway, by doing bilateral stimulation, what it does is it starts the brain going, here's two things I have to attend to. One is this horrible thing, and then the other is these eyeballs wiggling.
Right.
And the fact that the brain can go, hey, wait a minute, look, there's eyeballs moving, and I'm holding that in mind, and oh, that was not now, that was then.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I'm feeling something in my body. And so anyway, we keep doing the bilateral stimulation until the memory and all of the components of the memory are reduced in their disturbance level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that they can, this is what I always say, and I'll probably say it 1,000 times during this podcast, but is that so that they can be, feel, think, and do what they want to be able to do without any hindrance with the with the
From the trauma.
From the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Because people can sometimes not go to loud places.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody was telling
yeah.
me today that they can't go to Walmart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because too much going on, too loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a person who, I'm just going to say it is nothing to do with trauma. Not like you would think maybe a vet. They have all kinds of things going on.
Sure.
War,
Sure.
noises, lights, But no, that was an everyday woman. Can't go in. And it isn't because of trauma, meaning like the kind of trauma you would imagine, right? It is simply from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there you go. That's what we do in EMDR, and that's like the easy peasy version.
Right. That's the kindergarten version.
Yeah, the kindergarten version.
I can understand the kindergarten version.
Oh, good.
Yeah, maybe even junior high. I don't know beyond that.
Well, it's been wonderful.
I'll leave all that to those folks at Stanford then.
Yeah. Me
But
too.
but the whole thing. So bilateral stimulation is when the eyes are going back and forth.
Yes.
It's the bilateral. It's two sides.
That's right.
Or tapping is
Also
bilateral.
bilateral.
Okay, and
These
this
two sides of the brain.
So we're stimulating both sides of the brain.
Yes, and
See
so-
this now we're getting to junior high.
Okay,
We're
okay.
just upping it a little bit. So so the bilateral stimulation, we're doing that while they're thinking about the worst part of the image, and you say in your training if they took a snapshot of the worst part of it, what is that? What would that
Yes.
snapshot be?
Yes,
So they're
exactly.
holding that image and the negative belief, like I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. Holding those in mind while the bilateral stimulation is taking place.
That's correct.
Okay, and then it allows the body to reprocess
That's correct.
that event.
So we in the EMDR world,
Right.
when we're teaching, and this is Francine Shapiro's work, right?
Okay.
So we teach that it's like a train moving down the tracks. Like once we have
Right.
it all set up and we start the bilateral stimulation,
Right.
the train's going chugga, 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 chugga.
Right.
And we're on a cruise or the train.
Yes.
The cruise or the train. But we're chugga, chugga, chugging. And as we're doing this, the memory's being altered.
Okay.
We cannot put anything in. So it's not about us doing voodoo or something.
Right. I'm glad you said that. Yes, I often tell my clients, especially because most of them I've done talk therapy with for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I will be interjecting nothing. All I say is,
Yes.
notice that. So hold that together. We're going to do the bilateral stimulation. And then you just notice what's happening.
Yeah.
And then I will stop and have them take a breath and let it out and tell me what they're noticing. And then we go. I don't say anything. I don't say, oh, isn't that interesting? You did this? Nothing. So So this is allowing their brain to go where their brain needs to go.
That's right.
For healing.
That's exactly right.
So there's nothing implanted by any clinician.
No,
if they're doing EMDR correctly.
If they're doing EMDR, that's correct.
Right.
Right. And just as you continue, you sort of stop the train, and a little of the negative gets off,
Right.
and a little bit of the positive comes on.
Right.
So it just starts, diminishing in the level of disturbance that it has.
Right.
Oh, and it goes to its own natural conclusion.
Right.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, and I have to just say this, because when I got trained to do EMDR, I had already had it done on me, and I knew it worked because I had already gone through my own treatment for a trauma. Well, I didn't believe it for like a long time. I was like, how is this working? And
Okay, I don't feel so bad now.
No. I always say, bring it.
Yeah.
Because I did.
Yeah.
And that this is my life's work now.
I know.
So,
I know.
I don't
And
mind a
I tell all my students, like, I am a believer. I have seen transformation. I mean,
Yes.
I've seen people
Yes.
literally be freed
Yes.
from this torment,
Yes.
And in fact, one of them in my office, we've got several counselors that use EMDR in my practice, and one of them was with a veteran and couldn't do 4th of July. For obvious reasons, the sounds and everything. And after doing EMDR, he was able to celebrate 4th of July with his wife and his daughter for the first time after using EMDR. And I was like,
I know.
oh my gosh, yeah. And he was, and I was like, oh, I've got to learn more about this, But it's, I don't know. It's really transformational is an appropriate word to use. I know sometimes people are like, oh, that's kind of, and I'm like, no, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's the other thing. I don't know, my brain's going here, but it's like, I tell them, look, I can't promise anything.
Right.
I have no idea.
There's no
Right?
guarantee.
Is your thumbprint, right? So we can't guarantee anything.
Right.
But I'll give you my darndest hard work to try to get this matter taken care of. And I'm talking about like a traumatic brain injury where, or even somebody who has been paralyzed in surgery. So, like, I don't know. Right. But I'll give it a shot, and I'll give you my best shot at fixing things or helping you. And you know what? I've been pretty successful. So, but I don't pretend. Right. Right? That, oh boy, this is it. This is all you have to do. Right. Right. I don't, because I don't know.
And I've even too had some clients where we did a session of EMDR and they're like, whoa, that's a lot.
Yes.
And they are reluctant, maybe hesitant is a better word, like to kind of get back on that horse.
Yes.
And so they see that it brings about change, but sometimes people have adapted in ways, healthy or unhealthy, and they're like, I'm fine with this, And I know. It's sad for me because I'm just like, oh, there's so much more joy out there that could be had for you.
Yes.
But it's, like we've said, it's stuck and then hidden, and they're like, let's just keep it hidden.
Yeah.
But also we know that
it takes a toll.
It takes a toll.
And this is on the body.
Yeah. And then a lot of times they come in for therapy, and they come in for depression, they come in for anxiety. And really, if we can deal with some of this other stuff that is traumatic. I think as a society, though, I mean, we're living in a pandemic. And, I think of like, it's been so hard on teachers, medical professionals, law enforcement, just the culture of things that we've had. And so sometimes people are really reluctant to say, I had this experience and it was traumatic, and so they invalidate. And that makes it hard too in therapy to get them to like go, no, that's for us to validate for them. That's tough.
Yes.
That was trauma.
Yes.
That's, let's create some space for that, for you to deal with that.
I couldn't agree more. It's really interesting too, because, well, first of all, the impact that it's had on all of us is phenomenal. And then those of us who are treating people who are frontliners, and and this goes across the board for all the horrific things that have been happening in the last few years, but you know, we are traumatized as well. And then it was interesting because in Texas, this is an aside, but in Texas, where I live, Austin, we had what we call the snowpocalypse.
Right.
So we
Yes.
went without 5 days without electricity, freezing, the biggest snowstorm probably, I think, on record, and no water, no, you know, so here you are in the middle of a pandemic, you're walking around with 3 hats on and 4 socks on, and, you know, like we're laughing and talking, but go to bed at 6 o'clock because we're like, shoo, oh, we don't have to face this cold anymore.
Right. Made it through another day. Check.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't even really know why I'm telling you that story. So I'll stop there. But I guess it's not to underestimate that daily, you know, you think, what's a big deal? I had a power outage. Well, on top of everything else, our one safe place, our home.
Right.
We were, you know, in place. It wasn't safe either.
Right.
So it's like, oh, wow.
Well, and I think too, you know, we had a hurricane recently in Florida, and the thing about hurricanes, for example, is tornadoes are similar. You know, it's like, here's the path, and so these people should evacuate, and I think these are going to be okay, and they don't. And even the ones that are told to evacuate, I know a lot of times people will say, well, they were told to evacuate, they should have known. Well, how often have they been told to evacuate and then nothing happened? So then they're like, you know, I just thought this would be another one, and then this was the one that caught them.
Yeah.
You know, but, and even if they did evacuate, it's just having to have this hypervigilance. Like, that's traumatic.
Yes.
That's traumatic.
Yes.
Even if you escaped it and there wasn't anything, like you didn't know that you were going to, and you didn't know what you were going to come back to with your home, like that is still traumatic.
Yes.
And I think as a society, we don't give space for that. We don't validate that. And I know a lot of times people call, you know, big T or little t. And some people don't really like those terms because trauma is just trauma, which I completely agree with. But I think, too, a lot of professionals will say, more professionals don't really like that terminology, but like a lot of my clients accept it because they don't want to think, they don't want to really compare. Like,
Yes.
that is really traumatic. What I went through, and I'm like, yes, but it still was traumatic nonetheless. So maybe it was a little t, and they will accept that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes. And you have to work with who's in your office and how they might be able to really have that perception.
Right.
Yeah. And there was something you said, and I'm trying to fish it out, but it's it's something that we don't have to be ashamed of.
Right.
You know, that we can do something about it.
Right.
And get the support and get that stuff out of your body.
Because it gets locked in.
Yeah, it does.
It's
locked.
stuck and hidden and locked.
And the response, you know, it's like, let's go back to the car. So this woman's driving her car, and then all of a sudden, you know, we just started working on the car accident prior week. She's driving her car, and which is a big deal because she couldn't even drive. So anyway, driving her car, and somebody swerves. Wah! She freaks out. Right. And that's okay because there's things that are stored. We don't even know they're there still. Right?
Absolutely.
But that's going to impact how you are as a driver, your comfort. You're not going to take a cross-country trip anymore, you know, something maybe you did with your family and loved. It's like it's cutting you off. It's kind of truncating your life to live in this little tiny box of what's comfortable and what's uncomfortable, and then anything that might be uncomfortable, of course, you avoid. So even if it's something like we're talking about this again, like adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
Okay. And well, all of these are going to sound slightly traumatic, but I mean, who not very many people grow up without hearing a crossword in the home. So if you have fighting in the home, if you have drugs and alcohol in the home, if you have, you know, all of these different things that you don't think are really, they of course are affecting you, but you don't think it's me. It's not my part, right? I saw that, but
Right. You were exposed to it.
Yeah, I was exposed or something. But it can again be. I know we've said this already in different ways, but it can be something that we think is pretty minor. Maybe you moved a lot. Maybe you had a loss of a pet. Maybe, you know, I mean, it's just on and on.
Right. Right, because we attach this negative belief.
Yes.
So if you grow up exposed to things, then your negative belief could even be like, I'm not safe.
Yes. That's right.
And they usually will, the world is not safe. Like things are not safe. So they grow up with that. Or, the little girl that, perceived getting hit. And I've had other clients too that have had some similar things, and maybe it was intentional, maybe not, but then I can't trust people.
Yes.
So things like that, like they go through life then with this hidden longing also. So it's so important. And I just love that we have EMDR to help unlock that for people.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Well, thanks for sitting here with me today.
You're so welcome.
We have a whole lot more. We've got a whole season to talk about trauma and EMDR. So stay with us and catch us on our next episode, and we'll see you then. If this content has been helpful to you, I'd appreciate it if you would please rate the podcast, post it, and share it on social media. And also post a review. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my phone is 479-561-7600, or email Dr. Deborah at anchoredhopecounseling.net or Dr. Deborah at drdebfordoctors.com. Our website at www.anchoredhopecounseling.net has some useful information, and you can also reach out to me through the website. Remember, you are enough just the way you are, and you are loved.